And we're not arguing that AI can't make workflows much more efficient. They just don't magically turn a services company into a software company.
Welcome to another episode of Deep Learning with PolyAI. Today, I have the pleasure of having Nathan, a long-term friend, advisor, investor to PolyAI, on the podcast with me. Nathan and I, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man.
And we recently wrote this article. You did most of the writing, and I was happily contributed one board deck from when we decided not to acquire a contact center back in 2019. And I've been frankly overwhelmed with just how much feedback we've had. I've walked into 5 different events in London this week where people came up to me and were like, that is spot on, or like, I disagree with this or that. So maybe we can start with just kind of like the general introduction to the audience. So like, what is an AI rollup, and kind of like, why is it such a hot topic these days?
For sure. Yeah, so the setup here is there's insane amount of enthusiasm, market opportunity for building businesses with generative AI technology, whether that's voice, text, images, multimedia, and of course, like, investors are looking at different areas of the economy and asking themselves like which areas are most ripe to be kind of replaced or innovated on using generative technology. And one of the most obvious ones is anything that involves a lot of humans. And so what kind of tasks involve lots of humans? Those are typically ones where humans are talking to one another or consuming text or reasoning on documents. And there's an entire kind of area of business that relies on this, which is professional services and business process outsourcing. And so as investors are now looking at these different opportunities, they're thinking like, how might we attack them? And what they came up with is this idea of the AI rollup. And so the gist here is that investors will look at kind of these low margin service businesses and try to transform them using generative AI into high margin software companies, which is what everybody wants. And there's several, very large venture capital firms that have raised, pools of billions of dollars to go execute the strategy. And it sort of goes like this, where they'll find a traditional BPO that might operate as a call center or an accounting firm. Typically, these companies trade at very modest valuations because they're mostly services revenue. It's not like recurring software margins. Those businesses operate at quite low EBITDA margins, basically because they have a huge army of humans doing the work. And so step 2 is you buy this company for this low valuation multiple, and then you look at the workflows that humans are doing, and you take generative AI and you replace the humans with Gen AI. And the result of that is hopefully that your margin goes up because you have less humans, more software. And what used to require like hundreds of people to operate a call center or do accounting now is just done by a couple of humans managing this beautiful kind of ecosystem of AI agents. And the third step is the exit, where now you can hopefully list these companies or sell them to private equity firms or strategic buyers, not as kind of human-driven businesses with low valuation multiples, but as software companies with very high multiples. So because this is all the rage, and because like Nicola and the team at PolyAI had a lot of experience looking at this very strategy a couple of years ago, it was a really good opportunity to sort of revisit what they learned and ask ourselves, has anything changed? And I guess the TLDR, which we'll kind of dig into, is the evidence for why this is we basically conclude that on paper it sounds brilliant. A lot of things in business sound brilliant on paper. But we think that in practice, it's basically a mirage, because you're kind of confusing sort of like operational improvement with technology with business model transformation. And we're not arguing that AI can't make workflows much more efficient. They just don't magically turn a services company into a software company.
Yeah. I think that's like the high level thing. And I think, decomposing that, it's really the fact that, which lens do you apply and where are you starting from? And I think that to a lot of investors, they fall in love with just, and by the way, like I was the same. The idea seemed genius to me. You would definitely, had we done it in 2019 and had it worked and scaled, you get to have a Harvard case study named after you, and that'd be cool, right? Definitely something worth doing for a few years. Um, but the real thing that I think people miss in the whole story of at least this space is that they go, customer service will be transformed with AI. This is true. That is what we're doing. We
Yeah.
have, at the moment, there are 3 customers we have where we do the work of 1,000 or more people on behalf of each of them, right? So like the existence proof exists. It can be done,
Mm.
right? I think that in the whole like AI rollup then mentality applied to that, it's like, can I buy a company that will give me the next 10, the next 15 of those customers, where then 1,000 people becomes, well, or you provide them an extra 1,000 people to do that work, right? And in doing that, you scale the company really fast,
Yeah.
right? The truth is, those guys that do that work did not get there overnight. And more importantly, the BPOs that they no longer use, in the case of some of them, uh, really are there just to provide the human labor, right? And there is a wide spectrum of different kinds of BPOs. In fact, their kind of like transformation of the business model is already like underway. Some have done it better than others, right? And when we say professional services, there's like the Accentures of the world, and then you'll have like a Concentrix, which is historically more traditional like BPO that has now done a lot with technology, and really
Yeah.
there's somewhere in between an Accenture and the teleperformance, right? Now, if you're on the far end and you're just like human based, and that's the majority of what you do, you have to kind of like transform towards doing recurring work of a different nature. Maybe it's for software, maybe you then build margin on top of software you're reselling. It's not really often your own. And then you're an Accenture. And an Accenture trades far better and more favorably than a teleperformance.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, but I think the transformation of one to the other is a very different kind of like transforming the business to just them applying this AI on top. And we saw, I think, in the comments and in person, I've had a lot of people talk to me about like some of the people doing it successfully. A lot of people reacted to the whole software DNA piece. How do you think about that whole piece? Because I mean, I think there are many disruptors that become like technology companies entering an old, less interesting space. Like Amazon did it to like a Walmart, right? Or
Yeah.
you know, WeWork kind of tried, was hot for a while. You could almost, it wasn't really a roll-up thing, but when you think of the structure of
Mm.
their contracts, you could almost think of it as something similar, right?
Yeah. Um, One thing I think about is what is the customer actually buying, and like why are they procuring a service from a service provider? And I think in legal, for me, there's a good example of this. It's like even if I could have like ChatGPT do all my legals, like there is a decent amount of that legal work, which is probably the most high value one, where I still don't want to trust an AI because I need the expert advice from a seasoned lawyer who is there, every day doing these deals and can advise me in the best way. And where like use of that legal firm provides trust to the counterparties in the transaction. And they might end up using AI. I doubt that they're going to bill me less because they use AI. And so then we get back to this point of like maybe their margin goes up, but they're probably just going to end up doing more work.
Yeah.
And they're going to keep existing because of like the long-term trust and client relationship and sort of like that stamp of approval. So I sort of struggle in these domains where like the stakes are quite high, and I'm not just buying the output of the service, I'm buying the fact that there is a service.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're buying a
And that
throat,
might,
like in much of enterprise software, right? Like you're
yeah,
not just buying a piece of technology, you're buying
yeah,
a company you get to call and say, this no longer works or this must change. And
yeah,
if I'm paying you a lot of money, I get to impact your product roadmap. And like you will do that for me
yeah,
because I will then pay you more money, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So then you kind of like, I think these like a roll-up investors are perhaps like, not putting enough weight on the fact that services businesses aren't inefficient by accident. That like this kind of inefficiency is almost by design because it's the product. Like the clients play for this flexibility, for this customization, for more humans, less humans, someone to shout at when things don't go right. And if like that's just an army of AIs, like I don't know, you don't get you don't get all those benefits that you originally paid for. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think yeah, people will use AI for those things that make sense. Like the BPO, I think just in the customer service space, I think that people kind of like just gloss over the fact that there's different kinds of services you're buying, right?
Yeah.
Like contact center transformation, even if it's just like a different CCAS software being changed, a Genesis, a VIA out, the Genesis in, or something like that. Those companies are coming in to kind of like reinstall it and do much of that work, and that is like software implementation work, right? When it comes to the work provided by BPOs of the kinds that have hundreds of thousands of people, right? They're there just to provide labor. It is like
Mm.
account X needs 20 more people on Monday the 7th of July, right? And
Mm.
then account wants less, and they they don't get to affect a lot of their workflows. They're there just to provide the bodies, right? They're kind of like a server rack where you're plugging in not
Yeah.
GPUs, but you're plugging in humans, right? Um, when you think of other kind of like you mentioned legal, do you think there are other spaces where it could work?
Mm. Accounting is the other popular one, but there again, like I don't know, most serious businesses that need accounting are doing it because they have an audit, and you can't like kind of BS that in any way. Like, and I mean, just as like an anecdote, like I'm aware of a lot of companies use these sort of like next gen like compliance automation tools or like audit firms that are built for startups, but when you like scratch beneath the surface, some of these end up using third party like kind of freelance work to do these like security tests and things, and they're just not as robust as you might need to sell to an enterprise customer. And so I don't know, there's a bit of this like kind of turtles all the way down. It's like you can't fake the work. Like somebody who really knows what they're doing has to do the work properly. And if it's not done properly, it sort of defeats the entire purpose of this. And we're just sort of like implementing rules and regulations that people will just try to you know minimally cover in order to just like get it done, and defeats the spirit of the regulation and the rule in the first place, which is like business resilience and trust, and like not fudging things and not cutting
Yeah.
corners.
Yep. I mean, the whole thing is fascinating because I think that the gradual transformation of these large businesses that, in a world of ever accelerating models, and like it's getting hard to imagine the world in the next like
Yeah.
2 years, let alone anything else, right? I mean, I feel like this year, you know, like Altman said, it was like it will go slowly and then it will go fast, right?
Hmm.
Last year, I was surprised. I was, looking at the world around, and you see like just Chat GPT and everything you can do, and you know how impossible that was, like even 2 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just surprised with how little is happening. This year, I'm just feeling a frenzy of everyone's just trying to launch themselves into it as hard as they can. So I think there's appetite. I think a lot of people are going to make some mistakes, but that's okay because the value
Yeah.
created is inordinate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but I
And
think that
that
like
and this is kind of what's amazing is that you've been doing AI for your entire career basically, and I remember until probably like 3 years ago or something, we would all have to be sitting here whether you invested in a company doing AI or you're building one. It's like, please, can you try this software? And you're like, no, I can't be bothered. I have other priorities. Like, no, 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 but like, it's gonna work. Like, you should try it. It's really valuable. And like, no, I can like get lost basically. And then it turns out that their kids come home with ChatGPT with this like magic in their pocket, like, what is this? And then now they want to talk to you. It's like
yeah.
it's quite astounding. And I think we just forget it because we're always in this here and now. But like the stuff you have available today is pretty much deemed to be magic, like as of 10 years ago when you were writing like complex like RL dialogue trees and stuff like
Terrible stuff. I'm glad we no longer do it, right?
that.
But no, I mean, I spoke to a professor from EPFL yesterday, and he told me that a year ago, 100% of the students were using ChatGPT, and something like 15% of the lecturers were. The number is
Yeah.
now 100% of the students and 75% of the lecturers. So it's kind of like, but
Yeah.
it's just like, if we use these lecturers as proxies for like, executives, it took them a bit of time. But the beauty
Yeah.
was when it now they're like, why are we not doing it? Like, why are you all so
Yeah.
slow? Like, well, it
Yeah.
was you all along, but now you've changed and
Yeah.
that's good. Um,
Yes.
no, but it's a complete second coming. It's an activation that I'm visibly living through, and it's like you can't do enough on any front. The demand is through the roof. The competition is increasing. There's just a lot to fight for, and like the world has bought in, right? I think even
Yeah.
last year the world, like our community was like raving, and there was a lot more happening even on the client side. But this year it's just like unhinged, right? Because I
Yeah.
think everyone's so afraid of being left behind. And it's like a wonderful thing. But coming back to just like the topic, right? You look at the transformation of a lot of these businesses, and I can't help but feel, and I'm interested in your perspective as an investor, that even very large businesses now are moving really fast, and everyone's feeling on their side like they are an early stage startup, where like the outcomes will be very binary, right? So like if you're a BPO and you already were decaying for years, right?
Mm,
Revenue has grown, like the whole thing is a slog. The markets keep beating you and giving you lower and lower multiples, even when you do
yeah.
okay in terms of business performance, right? It must be hugely demoralizing, right? Where you kind of
So,
see some of them would want to kind of like go all in, like, and let's try this like last thing. But I think the ones in the middle, like you look at Accenture, it is the most acquisitive company, and it's probably the company that's made more money with AI than any other company, right? Just in kind of like all these
yeah.
implementations. Whether they're going to be successful or not doesn't matter because they're the ones providing the labor doing that at scale for
Yeah.
these companies who don't know how to do it themselves. Um, how do you think about that? Because like big companies are now moving really fast. Like when you look at the, you know, rate of releases even by Microsoft and Google, it is really fast. Everyone
Yeah.
feels like a startup, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The pattern I've seen a decent amount is enterprises will like pick a hero use case that they feel, is most apt to be solved using generative AI and try to make that a success with the vendor of choice. And then, if the vendor of choice manages to deliver on that, they basically get asked like, what else can you do? For us, which I think is quite a cool opportunity to yeah, bring these enterprises along this like, proverbial digital transformation that we've been talking about for I don't know how long. Um, and because like these vendors, are using technology that is like general purpose by nature, they're probably better suited to now like add adjacencies to their business. Where it's like, oh, I do audio, but like audio is kind of grounded in text to some degree, so I can do some text workflows as well, blah blah blah. Um, so I think it's a great opportunity for startups. I mean, big companies are certainly advancing, but just like it was 10 years ago when we used to ask the question like, why would X not do Y?
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
still looks like, startup is better at doing Y, right? Small teams that are dedicated still perform better than big companies.
Yeah,
And with all these like major talent movements that are, kind of happening right now at big companies, like it's um, it's not like they're on firm footing either. Um,
yeah. I think it's like, I mean, back to that kind of like, like DNA piece. I used to
yeah,
think that that culture was like a fluffy thing that didn't really mean anything at all. Now I'm
yeah,
like, the DNA of the company, its purpose, is why company exists, right?
yeah,
So in our case, it's to make enterprises the best version of themselves using artificial intelligence, right? And
yeah,
that can take the flavor of different products and adjacencies, right? But when you said kind of like, can you do the next use case? I remember a large public American company. I visited them and go into the kind of like main executive floor, and from his corner office, the CFO who approved our first deal, and we've grown with him, we've grown, they know us well. He goes like, "AI guy, get in, get over here." Like the guy gives me a hug and it's like wanted to talk about something like dynamic pricing using AI. And I'm opining the way I could, you could, right? And he's like, "Okay, you should do this for us." Like I'm like thinking, I might have even pinged you for like recommendations on companies or like who does this, right? I didn't know,
yeah,
right? And he's like, "Why don't you do it? I'll pay you money." Like, and I think it's like, he's like, "I'll pay for like the R&D, whatever." I'm like, I can't. I have like a limited amount of shots to
yeah,
fire and opportunity cost of
yeah,
doing something else. Even though it was really exciting, really cool, If you like
yeah,
froze, cloned me and sent me off to do another company, maybe I'd find it really interesting to do that, right? But it's
yeah,
like, yeah, it's exactly what you said. And you see these companies that like, kind of like single digit, maybe double digit ARR, going like, and now we have new product lines, and you're like tempting fate. It's probably not going to work. Like you need to have one thing. Like I don't know, when did Google have a second product line or any of these companies, right?
when it did a bunch of major M&A, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, there was search, and then they bought DoubleClick for ads, and then
yeah,
bought
yeah,
Google
yeah,
Maps and bought everything else. Um, Yeah, but the point you make is this individual trusts you and trusts the capabilities of your organization to deliver something, and yeah, there might be something better on the internet that he can go use, but he's going to have to go build trust in that vendor, and that's sometimes big enough inertia to not default to them in the same way that like enterprises would probably default to what's in their Azure like marketplace or AWS marketplace before they try to think about using someone else.
Totally, and I think like when you look to kind of like those people who will do adjacencies and things and implement it for a company, I think that's exactly where the Accentures of the world and Deloitte and others should play, right? Because they're the ones with like business practices and they have their
Yeah,
business. They'll probably stand to gain from AI the most. Maybe not in multiple expansion, but in like huge revenue growth and just like the work they need to do with humans, with AI agents, with everything, right? But they're the throat to
yeah.
choke of like bringing it to life at that enterprise scale often. Maybe like to top it off, like what are you excited about these days outside of like this whole topic? Like, where are you investing? What are you, um, what's keeping you up at night? What gets you ticking?
Yeah. I'd say the latest stuff I've been excited about. Well, so one is like I'm a big user of reasoning models. I think they're really powerful, like O3 and Opus 4, etc. And I think you can give that capability to enterprises on their own expertise. I clearly have gotten way smarter on like my data is actually valuable. Before, I don't think companies really thought about it as much. Like they knew it was there, like some blob
Yeah.
somewhere, but we've developed a technology that can make use of this blob now. And so how can you give like businesses really, really performant reasoners where you know that they can tell you the output of this system is good or not because they have expertise that does that on a day-to-day basis. Um, that's like one area. I think the second one is like video generation. It's like pretty astounding how fast that's going. And yes, like the segments now are like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, but I don't know if you look on your phone on Instagram or YouTube, like how long are the clips there before the scene changes? So you can imagine like kind of new gen, like new format Netflix start to get created, which is like fully generative and just trolling through
Yeah.
Twitter to look at VO3 videos, I think is really astounding. Um, I'll give you two more. Like the third one is like AI and protein design.
Okay.
Like we have a company Profluent that's been basically training like a chat GPT on proteins and protein function, and they can use this to design genomic editors called CRISPRs, which go
Yep.
into the
Yep.
genome and correct mistakes in the DNA that fixes disease.
I think like
Um,
the audience, that's like a really interesting thing. Like I've been fascinated by CRISPR like since I first
yeah,
heard of it. Where is that technology now? How far are we from like like engineering our children to look different? Because I think that's like one of the main things that
yeah,
people talk about and get outraged by, but also like they're
yeah,
obvious. It's
yeah,
part of the
yeah,
evolution, but I
yeah,
think we start being more like AI, right? It like tangibly
yeah,
impacts our evolution. So it's like,
yeah. Yeah, I don't know about the applications in like cosmetic clinics yet, but there is like an FDA and like UK approved medicine for that uses like CRISPR and to treat blood disorders. And in fact, like about 4 weeks ago, there was a child in the US. His name is Baby KJ, if you Google for it. But he had a genetic disease where the child typically lives up to 6 or 8 weeks and then loses its life. And they use a genomic medicine to correct the mistake in vivo in the kid, and he's still alive.
oh,
Um, so like this stuff does work, and because
that's
these
amazing.
genetic disease, yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, it's one of the areas of medicine where like the FDA and RFK is actually excited about it. So you kind of want to be. It's good to be on like the
Right side of the
excited.
administration, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, not doing vaccines. So yeah, you can use AI to design these custom editors in a way you couldn't do before. And then the last one is, of course, like defense and sovereignty of like, you know, democratic countries and, investing in solutions that can make sure that, yeah, we all still have, countries that we can live in. And
Yeah.
so I think that's
Second the
really important.
Yep, 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 yep. No, that's great. Okay, well, look, I, I think that the third example there is like really cool. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like it fills me with such hope, and I feel like it like in a world where a lot of people are getting quite nervous about it, like it's like, well, look, I
Yeah,
mean, that's like a life that like a person that gets to grow up
yeah.
because of AI, and that's
Yeah, the amazing thing is like what enables that technology to work is inspired heavily from what happened in natural language. So it's like it's a clear example of like diffusion of technology. So yeah, I think if there's always this trope of like, why should we be investing in this basic science? Like who knows what like this researcher studying some esoteric plant is going to do for like human life. And it's like, no, actually, like they'll discover these little microbes that edit DNA, and then we'll use like natural language processing research to design genetic editors, and then this kid has a life. So it's hard to like predict exactly where you should put your seeds when you fund research. The point is you should have a lot of seeds and
yeah.
incentivize creativity and diffusion of ideas.
Well, that's incredible. I mean, yeah. I mean, if when you look at pure science, I think like the Fourier transform probably didn't have an impact, and it seemed like some random like masking,
Right.
random French guy like put down on paper, and then it like stood there, and then a century later, someone used it as a vehicle for a lot of other things, right?
Yeah,
Awesome. Well,
exactly.
look, thank you so much
Yeah,
for
thank you. It's fun to collaborate on this one. Of
yeah.
course, we wish AI roll-up investors a lot of success, and if it
Uh,
works, we'll change our mind.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, yeah, go buy things, make it work, and that Harvard case study has still not been named. So best of luck to those pursuing them. And in the meantime, we'll just build software and sell software. All
Amen.
right, good to see you.